Here is the final video on conception. Part 3, we are going to touch base about infertility options and what happens when a couple cannot conceive naturally on their own. So, in order for a couple to be considered infertile, the technical definition of infertility is that a couple is unable to create a viable embryo after 1 year of intercourse without contraception. So, if a couple that you're working with, or or you're experiencing yourself, a lot of places won't consider fertility treatments until 6 months to a year. And it's usually a year has passed without successful pregnancy using natural reproductive methods. So basically having sex without any contraception. So if a couple is considered infertile, there are a lot of options that are available to the couple. However, it's usually at a significant financial cost. A lot of these methods are not covered by insurance, and so couples are looking at out-of-pocket costs ranging in the thousands of dollars. And so these methods are called assisted reproductive technologies, or ARTs. And so these are basically any treatment in which both the eggs and the embryos are handled. And so there's a scientific intervention that occurs to make a embryo. So the most common one that we hear about and also that's experienced in the United States is IVF, or in vitro fertilization. So it's essentially where eggs are harvested from the woman. And so a lot of times women will take some sort of hormone, like a hormone shot, which will increase egg production. So there's more to choose from. And so they'll harvest eggs. They will also take a semen sample. So the male will take care of business and provide a sample. And then the sperm and semen are combined with the eggs in a dish. And so they let nature and whatever do the thing, and embryos are created. Hopefully, the embryos are taken then and are frozen until the couple is ready to implant. And so these harvests can range in like the tens to $12,000 just to do that process. And then there's an additional cost to the couple to have the embryos injected. And so often what will happen is they'll have the little petri dish party, embryos are created. The doctor will be able to see which ones are the most viable and healthy embryos, and they'll implant those ones into the female. A lot of times they'll implant multiple embryos at a time to increase the chances of having a successful pregnancy at a lower cost, because this is one less operation. If you're putting one in at a time, there's less cost to freeze. However, then they do run the risk of a multiples pregnancy, and the parent might go from having 0 children to more than 1 at a time. And so that's just a consideration for couples with in vitro. They say there's usually about, I think, a 30 to 40% chance of success in women under 35 of having a successful pregnancy after IVF. And then as the woman's maternal age increases, there's a lower chance of it being successful. The other one, which is very similar to IVF, is the intracytoplasmic sperm injection, where they harvest the eggs again, and instead of taking the petri dish and having like a sperm and egg party in the dish, they hone in on one specific sperm that seems the healthiest and injects that directly into the egg. And so that's often used when there is a male fertility issue, that he has weak sperm or low sperm count. They will like very specifically take Mr. Sperm and Miss Egg and make a baby and use that baby to implant into the female. So it's a little bit more specific. There's some ethical dilemmas around that if you are creating a what you believe to be the ideal child. Now, again, that's not always used for that, but it could be looking at like selective genetics and having some discrimination towards what a couple believes to be an inferior genetic trait. Another option is an egg donor and gestational carriers. And so this is used in different ways. If a female just physically cannot carry a baby to term based on some medical condition or for multiple reasons, but their eggs and the sperm are viable, they can create viable embryos. they will be able to be implanted into a gestational carrier. This is also an interchangeable term with gestational surrogate. So basically, it's just like a host body carrying somebody else's biological embryo. This will also be used for same-sex couples, primarily with gay couples, because a male doesn't have a uterus and can't carry the baby, so they will use a sperm that, like a biological sperm that fertilizes an egg and put it into a gestational carrier because they can't carry their babies physically. In Michigan, you cannot pay a gestational carrier. That is illegal. And so the way around it is it's called an altruistic gestational carrier, where they have to be willing to do it at no cost. Now, often their medical bills will be paid, and that piece of it is legal, but you can't have a financial contract with a gestational carrier. There's a lot of legal stuff that goes into gestational carriers because some states won't allow a parental legal contract to occur before the baby is born. And so there's the chance that the gestational carrier could say, no, I'm not giving up my paternal rights. Now, again, I'm not an expert in this, so there might be some ins and outs that I don't understand. But I think it's important for social workers to know that when you're deviating from the normal, I hate that word, but the standard, a man and a wife, or man and female have sex, they have a baby naturally, and they carry it to term. Anything minus the fertility treatments, you have to start taking into consideration all the legal aspects of this. As I mentioned before, let's say if you're having a same-sex couple where one of the parents has biological connections to the child, so either the sperm was used or the eggs were fertilized by a sperm donor, the non-biological parent has to go through a lot of hoops and red tape and legal things to become a legal parent to the child that their spouse has created. And to make matters even more complicated, each state is different. And so if you move from state to state, you might be a legal parent in, let's say, Illinois, but you move to Michigan for your job. Michigan has pretty stringent laws that they're a little bit more intense and strict, and you have to go through a lot more processes to become a legal parent. It can have a really hard psychological toll on the non-biological parent. I have a former colleague who went through this process where they actually did have, they were legally married in a different state. They conceived via the intrauterine insemination, which is the next one we'll talk about, which is a sperm donor. And so the non-biological parent had to legally adopt the child in Illinois, but when then they moved to Michigan, they had to see if, first of all, if their same-sex marriage was legal, but then they had to go through the process of readopting. It was took a large psychological toll on the couple, and specifically the non-biological parent, because there was a lot of attachment and bonding stuff that kind of got messed in the head with when you're being told that this is not your kid, even though your spouse has this kid. There's just so many facets to it. And if you happen to be in a counseling situation where your client is going through something like this, it's really good to be aware of all the different pieces that can impact the psyche of one of the people in the relationship. Gestational carriers are not used solely for same-sex couples. Kristen Sturck, who came and talked in HPSI 1, they heard her husband used a gestational carrier because of Kristen's heart disease, and unfortunately, like she probably shared, they did not have a successful gestational carrier experience. They lost the two embryos that were implanted, and they didn't have a successful pregnancy. And so that's another instance where a gestational carrier could be used. Intrauterine insemination, I think of this in very casual terms terms as the turkey baster, where you have the egg, the female gets injected with a sperm donation. So there's sperm banks. You can have a buddy of yours, I guess, however you want to look at it. This is often utilized for same-sex couples or individuals who do not have a partner but wish to have a child. IVC is a newer type of IVF. It's more cost efficient. It's a little bit newer, so I'm not as familiar with it, but it involves kind of the similar concept of fertilizing the egg with the semen. But while those friends are trying to make a baby in there, it's re-implanted into the female, and then the embryos are harvested out of the little cylinder or case that it's in, and then the embryos are retransferred into the female. Again, I don't know much about it, but it's supposedly a more cost-effective option, and it also encourages some more bonding with between the embryo and the female, because they're being formed, even though they're being formed inside a container inside the female, they're not being formed in a lab. It'll be interesting to see if this is a continuing trend, and if it's an effective way, and kind of eliminate some of the cost barrier, as well as the bonding and attachment, kind of that psychological piece for mothers. And the final one is a uterine transplantation. And so that's transferring another uterus into somebody else. So if the woman's uterus is inhospitable and they find that they need a new one, there's been a very, very, very minimal live births come from it, because this is not a common practice, but it is another option that exists out there. I wish I had a more current stat, but I struggled to find something that was more current than 2016. But in 2016, so about 5 years ago, 2% of all live births were a result of ARTs, which I think is pretty fascinating. So it's I'm not sure why that is. I have my my theories that there's more same-sex couples now that same-sex marriage is legalized. It's more commonplace for same-sex couples to have children or to attempt to create their families with this method. More people are becoming open about infertility. It's not as taboo as before, and so people are starting to reach out to them. Advances in science allows for it too. So be curious to see if this trend continues to go up or if it stays about the same. So areas, the dimensions that infertility treatments might impact. The video I linked on here, I will put into Sakai as well, so you can click on it. There's some spiritual aspects. Women who can't have babies might be told to pray harder, or it's not in God's timing, or we should not be playing God with science and having that intervention that if you're not getting pregnant, it's God's will. And then taking alternative methods might create shaming from the spiritual community, or like in Kristen Sturck's situation, their choice to have a gestational carrier resulted in her husband losing his position at church. Social structures, so looking at healthcare, insurance, availability of hospitals and doctors who will be able to perform some of these fertility treatments. Is it accessible to everybody, or do you have to be in a higher income bracket in order to be able to afford it? The cultural acceptance, if this is something that is normalized or not. As I mentioned in the previous video, there's a trend of females freezing their eggs. That's becoming more commonplace for single females too, so that's kind of a cultural piece that gets influenced. The psychological toll that might take on a female who can't carry, or even a male, it can really impact relationships and your perception of self-worth. Thankfully, there's a lot more discussion about infertility now, so there's more support groups, but that is something that I think is very valuable for individuals who are not able to conceive naturally. So finally, why is it important for social workers to know about infertility treatment options? Again, self-determination, being able to talk with their clients and kind of counsel them through all those different pieces. Again, we don't have to be experts, but being aware that there's options and that it does take a psychological impact is very, very important for social workers to know.